Friends, we gather together this morning to celebrate the life and to honor the memory of Nancy Arnson. Nancy's family so very much appreciates your presence here with them this morning, which offers them a great deal of comfort and support. Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu ben enosh v'chashvehu. O Lord, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days are as a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, in the evening it fades and it withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, "Return, you mortal creatures." Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away, our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. The author of the first of the Bible's 150 Psalms reminds us about the quality of a life well lived and the fruits of that life. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, nor taken the path of sinners, nor joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades and whose fruit always flourishes. Let us take comfort now together in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, the author of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Nancy Arnson died early this past Thursday morning at the age of 92. She lived a long and a remarkably full life, and we will miss her. Nancy was born in Minneapolis on January 13, 1927, and she was raised in Baraboo, Wisconsin. Her family was one of only 2 Jewish families in Baraboo, but Nancy said that while she was growing up, she never experienced any anti-Semitism or any prejudice of any kind. Upon graduation from high school, Nancy matriculated at the University of Wisconsin, where she majored in biology. During her college years, her thoughts about vocation crystallized around the idea of becoming a physician. So she went to talk to the dean of the university about applying to medical school. But the dean threw immediate cold water on the idea, telling her that she ought to give up on this plan for 2 reasons: because she was a woman and because she was Jewish. I imagine that those bitterly received biases delivered to her by the dean as undoubtedly entirely natural left her crestfallen. Yet knowing Nancy as I did, I am sure that she recovered quickly and proceeded to follow another career path that called out to her, a career in science and in education. During her college years, a friend of hers, Arlene Arnson, told her that she had a very handsome brother and that she would like to introduce them to one another. One thing led to another, and in June of 1947, Nancy Fredman and Robert Arnson were married here in Cleveland. Thus began a 58-year union that ended only with Bob's death in 2005. Now, Nancy had a long, distinguished, and varied career in education. She taught science at Wiley Junior High School for many years, and after having received her master's degree in secondary education, Nancy took a position as a unit principal at Cleveland Heights High School, where she worked for several years. Then she accepted a position as assistant principal at Roxborough Junior High School, from which position she eventually and officially retired. But retirement didn't stop Nancy. Soon she was asked to join the Hebrew Academy Day School community in the capacity as administrator of the school's secular studies. At some point later, Nancy was encouraged to take an administrative position at the Solomon Schechter Day School. Indeed, a remarkable career in the field of education. These then are some of the important accomplishments in a career of service to our community. But what were Nancy's personal attributes, her qualities of character, the things about her that made her so successful in her work, and, as many of you will attest to, such a valued friend? Now, several of her fine qualities are already implicit in the career she carved out for herself. Her capacity for clear and sustained thinking, what her son Ron called her scientific attitude, her ability to recognize a problem and to imagine a solution, to recognize a challenge and devise a path forward. In addition, Nancy was, in the words of her daughter Gail, very practical, a no-nonsense person. She was not easily ruffled, nor was she given to the overt expression of her emotions. She was not outwardly demonstrative about her feelings, but as both Ron and Gail noted, she showed you the depths of her emotions and the love she had for you in and through her actions. In addition, it was to Nancy that friends and relatives often came for advice, recognized as she was for her wise counsel. And because she was non-judgmental, took seriously who you were, what you said, and because she was not a gossip. When you came to her with a problem or for advice, you knew that the conversation was not going to go beyond the two of you. I myself had the privilege of studying with Nancy for many years at the Cleveland College of Jewish Studies. I knew her as a lovely, soft-spoken person with a winsome smile, a strong intellect, and a quiet manner. She made her presence felt, but without a trace of bravado or self-assertion. After Bob died, and especially after she retired completely, Nancy remained active, playing bridge at a very high level, participating in a variety of book clubs with friends, swimming, and engaging in aerobics at the JCC. In fact, Nancy was still doing aerobics 3 mornings a week up to just months ago, in part because she knew that staying physically active was a key to maintaining her health. In addition, Nancy was creative at knitting and crocheting. Indeed, she was known for the blankets and the scarves that she created. She committed herself to making blankets for each and every one of her great-grandchildren. And just weeks before she died, she completed her 17th blanket for a great-grandchild on the way. Staying active, remaining devoted to those she loved, right up to the very end of her life. Now, some months ago, Nancy's physician told her that her white cell count was extremely low. And this meant that she had almost no immunity whatsoever. He advised her to stay at home so as not to be exposed even to the simplest of colds, which could have had devastating consequences for her. But Nancy did not take the doctor's advice because, as she said, she simply could not live that way. So she continued to go out, continued to have lunch with friends, continued to go shopping, and to be involved. She was determined to live the only kind of life that made sense to her, a life with people, a life of activity, and of involvement. Nancy is survived by her sons, Kurt and Ron, by her daughter, Gail, by her daughters-in-law, Terry and Joan, and her son-in-law, George, by her grandchildren, Yael, Yoav, Asaf, Gidon, Michal, Gabriel, Hannah, Ilana, Ariella, and Danielle, and by her 16 great-grandchildren, with a 17th on the way, by her brother-in-law, Alan, and her sister-in-law, Sue. She was predeceased by her parents, Albert and Francine, by her husband, Bob, by her brothers-in-law, Herb, Bert, Mickey, and Art, and by her sisters-in-law, Eileen and Arlene. Nancy Arnson lived a long and a richly lived life. Though she was an unassuming and even-keeled person, she made an indelible impact on her family, her friends, her community, and all of us who knew, admired, and loved her. Zichrona livracha. The memory of Nancy Arnson will always be our blessing. Amen. I now want to call on several people who will reflect upon the life, the qualities, the accomplishments of Nancy Arnson. First, her son, Kurt.
Thank you. I want to, before I start, remind also of her sister-in-law, Faye, who is still with us, and her sister-in-laws, Edith and Margaret, who've predeceased her. I last saw her, everything becomes kind of coalesces together when you know somebody over 70 years. I last saw her about a month ago when she was running around and active and pushing herself to get out every day as much as possible. And then I came back and Terry and I had a evening course that we take on, which among other things that this week did an Agnon story by Shai Agnon, the Nobel Prize winner from Israel. And we both said at the same time, oh my goodness, you know, everyone's read this story 1,000 times. This is Nancy. This reminds us of Nancy. So I want to just stutter through a translation of the first paragraph and then say why this is Nancy, if I may. This story was written in 1950, takes place in the 30s, perhaps, in the 40s Mandate period. There was this old lady. She was in Jerusalem. She was a very comely lady. You've never seen anybody like her. She was righteous, a righteous woman she was, smart she was, gracious she was, humble she was. The light from her eyes showed only mercy and understanding. The marks on her face showed peace and blessing. If you could only say if you could say of women that they were similar to, you can't really say of women that they're similar to angels, but if you could, I would say that she was a specific angel of God. There's never been anybody like her. She was, if the youth that came out of her just was so vital that if you didn't see her facade, that she was an old lady, you would never know her age. This lady in this novella is 104 years old, it turns out. The narrator is 70 years younger than she is, a writer. He thinks that she's a simple lady because she was just standing around. He was asking directions, how to get to someplace. Turns out she ended up taking him under account. She knew everybody. She thought, she just wandered around. This lady was a visitor in every house in Jerusalem. She guided him through the city, and she told her story. She finished telling his story to him. She said, my work is done. She went to close off the rent on her apartment, and they said, you got your apartment for years yet? She said, no, I'm finished. She went to the burial society, made arrangements for her burial, paid in advance. They said, lady, what are you doing here? She said, not going to happen. I'm finishing up. My work is done. The end of the story is the author, the narrator, comes back the next day to visit her in her house, and they say, that's it. She died during the night so as not to bother anybody. We took care of her body. She's left. She made her arrangements. She's left. She set her time. She decided how her life was going to be led. She decided how her life would be ended. This story has all kinds of levels that go through it, but the most important thing with this, I think, to me and to thinking of Nancy, is that she was a visitor in every home in Jerusalem. She knew everybody from all levels of society, and she graced them with her friendship. She became a friend of everybody. They all ended up knowing each other because of her. And I think enough already, but this is what we are. This is what you are outside of here. We together have been graced with her friendship. We are all part of this community that she has built to, we're her legacy. All of us. Her friends are her legacy. It's enough. Zichrona Livracha, may her memory be a blessing.
Nancy's granddaughter, Ilana.
Good morning. I'm Alana, one of Nancy's 10 grandchildren. To be exact, I'm grandchild number 4, or number 1 of the Americans. But Grandma would never identify or introduce us in this manner, because to her, each child, grandchild, and great-grandchild was very special, and we each had a unique relationship with her. My sisters and I were fortunate enough to live in close proximity to our grandparents as we were growing up. I thought of them not just as my grandparents, but really as a second set of parents. They took us to their lake house on the weekends, they cheered me on at my sporting events, they supported me throughout my educational endeavors in more ways than one. Grandma was always asking questions. She was asking questions about what was going on in our lives. In fact, we would joke that Grandma always had too many questions for us. But as a result, she knew many details of all of our lives. In fact, she seemed to know where everyone was at every moment. If Danny wasn't answering her phone, I didn't know where she was. Just ask Grandma. She knew where she was. Amazingly, this was not only limited to her family in the US. I always enjoyed catching up on what all of my cousins were up to through my conversations with her. She was an extraordinary woman. She was smart, wise, and intellectually curious, in addition to being a lifelong learner, creative, a great cook, quite tech-savvy, active both physically and socially, caring and loving. She was a personal role model of mine. She had, as you heard, ambitions of becoming a physician as a young woman. She applied to medical schools and was rejected, not because she didn't meet the mark, but simply because she was a woman. She was told, why should we give a spot to a woman who will just go on to have babies and not practice medicine? So she went on to pursue a fulfilling career as an educator and educational administrator. Through her career, she touched the lives of many. She followed my education and career path to becoming a physician closely. I do have one early memory, I believe from middle school, of sharing my grades with her and telling her I had received an A-. Her response was, why the minus? She had high expectations, and I always strove to meet them and make her proud. Throughout all of her 92 years, she stayed active both mentally and physically. Her activities ranged from adult education classes, to book clubs, to bridge group, to swim class, to travel, and much, much more. Her social calendar was always busier than any of ours. She collected friends of all backgrounds easily throughout her life, and they shared various interests. She sometimes joked with me that her friends were getting younger and younger because few people could keep up with her in her age and her mental capacity. She was sharp as a tack until the very end. I'd like to share one recent example. 2 weeks ago today, we hosted a birthday party for our baby who just turned 1, Eliora. After the party, I shared photos with her via text. I shared one of the cake, and her response was, "It's beautiful, but I hope you got a discount for the misspelling." What misspelling, I thought to myself. I quickly examined the photo, and sure enough, Eliora's name was misspelled. I think that Grandma was the only one who noticed this. And no discount for us because Jared had proofread it upon picking it up from the bakery. I will miss Grandma for many reasons. I will miss calling her on my drive home from work. I will miss her advice on various topics from cooking to parenting. I will miss her good sense of humor and her smile. But I am blessed to have shared so many years with her and to have so many good memories. As Maya Angelou said, a great soul serves everyone all the time. A great soul never dies. It brings us together again and again. Thank you.
Nancy's grandson, Gabe.
Hey everybody, my name's Gabe. I'm Nancy's grandson, one of Nancy's grandsons. Yeah, that was great, Kurt and Alana. And I think, the things that I have to say pretty much echo some of the same themes that they've already expressed, which I think is pretty powerful. But anyway, so my grandmother, Nancy, or my sweet grandma, as my 3-year-old calls her, yeah, she was really an indispensable part of my life, and I just want to share a few thoughts about that. Growing up, similar to Alana, we lived pretty close by to where she and Bob lived, and my sister and I, Hannah, would see her pretty much every Sunday, regularly, throughout our childhood. And we just really learned so much from her. I certainly did. I learned, how to play cards, something that she did up until the end. I learned a lot about cooking, and there's still so many recipes that we all have in our family that we share, that we learned from her. I learned about sports. An interesting fact that I believe to be true is that she and Bob, one of their first dates together was actually an Ohio State football game, where they, escalated their romance. So I think that's pretty neat. And so on Sundays we would watch football or baseball, whatever sports were on, and she was certainly a fan of the Browns and Indians and Cavs in the lean years and in the mean years. She made stuff. She made stuff with her hands. And it's not just this kind of stereotype of the grandma with a knitting needle. I mean, she was that, as we've heard, but she just was so creative and innovative in how she did her work. And I remember once, it's probably around 10 years ago, she visited some of us in Chicago, and we were hanging out, and I took her to this like hipster knitting shop in the neighborhood, and she just immediately hit it off with these 20, 30 somethings who worked there, and they're just sharing some stuff, and she's like, oh yeah, I've been working on this new stitch. They're like, what is it? She's like, oh, I just kind of made it up. And she's like doing some stitching. They're all just like hanging on her every word or hanging on her every stitch. It was pretty cool. And I guess another thing that we'll always remember about her is her love for Subarus. As far as I know, she was the first person in my extended family to drive a Subaru when I was a kid. And, since then, I drive a Subaru. My parents drive a Subaru. My aunt and uncle drive a Subaru. My cousins drive Subarus. My sister, brother-in-law drive Subarus. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I don't know the whole story behind that, but hopefully she got some sort of kickback. But, I know for myself, just to share something personal, I mean, growing up with her, and then as I got older and went away to college, I mean, I struggled sometimes, and, I had some problems. I actually dropped out of school, and it was always so comforting knowing that I could always count on her and Bob to be there for me, no matter what, to love me unconditionally, and to really teach me about how that works, and that was so important to me. And, I remember I eventually did go back to school, and, I finished, and she gave me a Subaru to celebrate that. And, man, I drove that car for, like, a long time. Anyway. But, yeah, and I think, and this is, I think kind of her enduring legacy, at least for me, is going to be, the infrastructure that she created around herself. And, what I mean by that is, all the friends and family she embraced and networked with, and, I mean, kind of as Alana described, it's like you talk to Nancy, and, she talks about how Omer up in Israel, my little cousin got like a A on his science paper or something like that. Or you talk about how Lily, had a great experience at summer camp, and I get to learn about all these things, about my family through her, and that's just so important to me. And even, professionally, I haven't lived in Cleveland for like 20 years, and in my work, I encounter people who say, wait, Arnson, are you related to Nancy Arnson? She was my science teacher. She was my principal. I didn't know her, but my sister studied with her. And just everyone has the story about her. And it's just amazing, her ability to network and to build this infrastructure, both among my extended family and just throughout the community and the communities that she was a part of. And I think everyone here pretty much reflects that. Yeah, and so that's pretty much all I have to say. I mean, I think that, at least for me, that will be enduring. Those deep bonds, we will forever be rooted together, and it's something that we're all going to have to work on, in her absence, to be able to, keep everyone together. And I look forward to doing that.
Nancy's son, Ron.
Hi, I'm Ron, her second son. I guess I thought I bought a Subaru because of Consumer Reports, but now I understand more about it. In 2003, Eleanor Weisberger, the child therapist and author, retired, and she decided to write a book about people's defining moments from other retired people. And my mother was one of the people she interviewed. And I think you would enjoy hearing what my mother thought were the defining moments in her life and the things that shaped the way she is. So I'll just read a few paragraphs from this. She, Nancy, started talking about her mother, Frances, who had come to this country in 1892 from Poland as a child of 5. She met her husband, Albert, an artist, the educated son of a German-Jewish family, who worked for the Brown and Bigelow Company of Minneapolis, painting and engraving for their calendars. Times were hard when her father decided to open a clothing store to support his growing family. He lost the store when he suffered an accident and found himself unable to work. Her mother, in an effort to reduce the family expenses, moved everyone to Baraboo, Wisconsin. This was in 1929 when my mother was 2. My mother was the latest addition to the family, and as a young child, when her mother undertook to establish a business in a store below their apartment in Baraboo, she had no assets and was unable to establish a line of credit. She took the overnight train to Chicago every Friday night, buying a few goods with the small amount of money she had, and then returned by train on Sunday night, bringing the merchandise to the store that she had purchased so she could open for business on Monday. Every week the process was repeated. Then, with her credit established, she found herself welcomed everywhere. This plan enabled Frances to be there for her children during the week, with their father Albert sitting for my mother on the weekends. By the way, Albert died when my mother was 11. The store was located downtown, which was 4 or 5 blocks long and available to anybody who stopped in. Frances, once her own credit was established, made it available to her customers when necessary. Since the Depression was still going on, many people bartered for clothes, and farmers would bring her eggs, produce, chickens, even turkeys. My mother said, Frances was a superb seamstress, and I feel lucky that I inherited her skill in needlework. In time, the shop became prestigious, the more affluent women coming in for smart dresses and hats. I also seem to have inherited a strong science gene, she added. Nancy demonstrated her ability in math and science in high school, and when she applied for college at the University of Wisconsin, she chose a pre-med curriculum. Nancy felt high school education was superior. She said there were 3 main groupings at high school: the farm kids, who were what they called FFA, Future Farmers of America, the shop kids learning blue-collar skills, and the college prep kids. She said that her high school was 40 miles from Madison, and many of her teachers had master's degrees from the University of Wisconsin. In high school, she studied math, chemistry, and physics, and took 4 years of Latin. In fact, she laughed, our yearbook was written in Latin. She was active in the literary club and the girls' club, which put on plays, and went on to become valedictorian of her senior class. Her main goal at college was to become a doctor. To help defray expenses, she worked part-time in an undergrad lab, doing research on rats and cleaning the snake house. Often, many years later, she would still comment on the terrible smell from the snake house. She graduated in 1947 for college. So those of you who didn't know her will still recognize these stories of the Depression and how important they were in terms of shaping people's lives. And those of you who knew my mother will probably understand why she believed these events were so important in shaping her life. One last thing, a few months ago, we were going through some papers, and she found her old report cards from high school, and she noted that there was a B on one in social studies, and she said it was. She had, of course, a good explanation. The teacher would chaperone the school dances, and for some reason he would always ask her to dance constantly. She thought it was so creepy that she wouldn't pay attention in class. Thank you.
O God of life, amid the ceaseless tides of change which sweep away the generations, your love remains to comfort us and to give us hope. Around us are life and death, decay and renewal, the flowing rhythm that all things obey. Our life is a dance to a song that we cannot hear. Its melody courses through us for a little while, then it seems to cease. Whence the melody, and whither does it go? In darkness as in light, we turn to you, the source of life and the answer to all of life's mysteries. Will you please rise now for the El Mole Rachamim? El Mole Rachamim shochein bamromim, hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, im kadoshim utahorim kazohar harakia mazhirim et nishmat nechama bat freda, shahalcha la'olama. Bala rachamim yastireh b'seder kanafav la'olamim, v'yitzror bitzror hachayim et nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our loved one, Nancy Arnson, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say together, Amen. Will you please be seated? I want to announce that Nancy's family will receive friends at the clubhouse of the village at 26,000 Village Lane today, following our interment service, and until 5 o'clock this evening, and then tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday, from 1 to 4 and 6 to 8. Our service will continue now at graveside at the Mayfield Cemetery. Once again, on behalf of the family, we so much appreciate your presence here with us this morning.